earlier about a proposed ordinance dealing with solicitations.
Yes. Madam Chair, if I may. I'm passing out at this time an ordinance that would impose an absolute ban upon solicitation or distribution of materials within medians or within streets, regardless of the classification of the street. I know that there will be at least one change on this between now and next week, and I had, in drafting it, suggested certain intersections that we had gotten specific complaints about, and I did not get that language stricken. I meant to strike that because there's been several that have been mentioned. I didn't want to just mention every one of them. So starting on lines 17 to 20, what I will do is I will end that recital within the city, put a semicolon there, and then strike the balance of that instead of mentioning any specific different intersections. If I may, we've been trying for some period of time to see if there was any way that we could create an ordinance that would allow some types of solicitation or distribution of materials from in roadways, from medians within roadways. We've had groups mention a particular desire to do that, two groups in particular, and it has just been almost impossible to find something that will justify a ban but then turn around and allow certain groups to do it when the ban is based upon public safety. The law within the 8th Circuit, which is where we're located, has a wonderful case out of the city of Delage, Missouri, in which they imposed a complete ban. Then the court went on and said that this was okay. Some courts have actually imposed permitted ordinances that would make it an ordinance violation for a driver of an automobile to lower their window and either give money or accept something. But the city manager suggested to me that there was no way in the world he wanted that to surface, so we do not have that in here. What I've got in here right now is a definite statement in Section 1 of the ordinance that a person cannot stand in or enter upon a roadway, median, or portion of a public street for the purpose of distributing anything to the occupant of any vehicle. Section 2 of the ordinance prohibits people getting into those areas for the purposes of soliciting any item, including but not limited to money, from the occupant of any vehicle. Notice it's occupant and not driver. It doesn't matter who that is. Section 3 notes that if they can distribute something by standing on the sidewalk and traffic is not moving and the occupant wants it, they can hand it over to them, like a paper or a flyer or something of that nature. Section 4 notes that nothing in this prohibits any solicitation on the sidewalks. And that's how we've got it worded there, because this is worded in terms of sidewalks, but it means any place within the city that a person would have the right to solicit funds under the First Amendment. I want to suggest to the board that in developing this ordinance, in addition to learning how really learned people that went to great law schools could so readily disagree with each other about what can and can't be done in this area, that two things struck me. One was in the area of Montgomery County, Maryland. They put together a task force that went into great detail about a number of items and number of areas and how they dealt with some of these. I am not convinced that it is impossible to figure out a way that perhaps some groups can actively do some solicitation. However, I am convinced that there's no way we're going to get that figured out right now, particularly even though it dealt with a signed ordinance. The U.S. Supreme Court decided a case late last week that broadened substantially the definition of what is a content-based regulation. The significance of that is that if a regulation touches First Amendment rights and it is deemed to be content-based, then the legality of that regulation or ordinance is looked upon with strict scrutiny, and it has to be, among other things, essentially the least restrictive alternative. It doesn't have to be the least restrictive alternative, but it's got to be very close to it. In law school, the way they told us that is strict scrutiny, government loses, rational basis, government wins. So while everybody is saying that it doesn't mean it's fatal in fact, the cases are not holding that it's not fatal in fact. That said, this takes care of a very immediate problem we've had, which has included not only people in the medians and walking among the cars, which has never been permitted, but we now have children being asked to walk among the cars. One of the issues we had immediately was, well, can we do something by putting an insurance requirement on any group that's doing this? That raises a whole issue, a whole set of new issues in terms of their financial ability to pay and their First Amendment rights. But more importantly, it negates the idea that we're doing this for public safety. I mean, we're not only concerned about people, as I understand it, within the streets not being injured when being hit by a car. We're also concerned about drivers not being psychologically injured because they hit somebody, and God forbid that they hit and seriously injured a child trying to gain money to go to basketball camp. So this is a complete ban, but that doesn't mean that the city can't revisit the issue at some point in the future and see if there's something else we can do, and we're continuing to work on it.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, two things, Tom. And I think it's a good ordinance, and I want to put it on the agenda for next week and probably hold it separate because I would imagine there'll be some people here to speak on it. But what is the penalty section in here for violation of this? Because I see the general section that refers to our penalty.
It would be the general section 1-9, and I probably ought to add that as a section.
I think you should.
Clarify.
There's got to be some penalty for violating it. That's all I have.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Director Adcock. And I just want to say, Tom, thank you. And we've been talking about this, and I have had incredible discussion on Facebook and via email and phone with a lot of people, more than I think almost any issue we've ever had on this. I will not be here next week, and just want to say that I support this ordinance, but I won't be here to vote on it.
Okay. Director Hendricks?
No, not on that.
No,
It's something else.
No, not on this. I have something else.
Okay. Then this item will be kept separate next week, and please get it out to the directors who are not here by email so they'll know that we've discussed it.
I will do
The
that.
item on the resolution
With
will
the
be
addition
placed.
you talked about, Tom.
Right, and just to let you know, the attorney that represented one of the groups, I will make sure he gets it, and I will also make sure that Local 34 gets it because they've expressed interest in it.
Okay. And the item on the resolution will be put on the consent agenda. And Director Hendricks, did you have another item?